So, over the last few years, I have been here and have preached about love in pretty much every sermon. Not the ishy squishy love, but the powerful, liberating, and life saving love Unitarian Universalism has to offer a hurting world. The newly adopted wording for Article 2 of our Unitarian Universalist Association's bylaws presents this love as a verb, not a noun. Quote, love is the power that holds us together and is at the center of our shared values. We are accountable to one another for doing the work of living our shared values through the spiritual discipline of love. What even is the spiritual discipline of love? Now, I've been asked that in a lot of different ways by a lot of different UUs over the last 2 years. So let's start with what a spiritual discipline is. A spiritual discipline or spiritual practice, they pretty much mean the same thing, is anything that when done regularly cultivates spiritual development. In other words, if we think about our life and our own personal journeys, a spiritual discipline is something that helps move us along that path into being our best selves. In Unitarian Universalism, that can look like a lot of different things since one of our values is pluralism. My spiritual practices are a mix of some of the practices I learned as a child in various denominations and some of the pagan practices I picked up as an adult. Those are what move me along my path to being my best self. Yours may be completely different, and that's what makes us such a rich tapestry. And what binds us together is that ideally our spiritual practices are rooted in love. Well, what does that mean? It means that hopefully all of our varied spiritual practices operate out of a sense of love, not fear, not hate, love. Now, in the traditions I grew up in, my spiritual practices were rooted in fear. Fear of hell, fear of making God mad, fear of ending up on the outside of the inner circle. So I did the things. I went to prayer meetings. I guarded my heart against all evil things, the definition of which seemed to shift and change on the regular. And I stayed scared. Scared of messing up, scared of being found out that I was questioning, scared of not measuring up to the unknown measuring stick upon which my soul would be measured. Those kinds of spiritual disciplines are exhausting. Sadly, a lot of the spiritual disciplines I had back then were rooted in hate as well. I had to do the things I did to prove that I was better than the people deemed outside of our circle. And I'm not proud of that time in my life. And I know that it was because I didn't know of any other way. I was taught, like so many others, that those outside of our walls were there to be brought in, whether they actually wanted to or not. I was taught that I was helping them, even when they didn't necessarily need nor want my help. So what does it look like now? Well, now my spiritual disciplines are rooted in love. And that means I'm using them to check myself and make sure that I am operating out of love in what I do. And this leads to the other question I get asked a lot by UUs. The question often sounds like, but it's really hard for me to have loving feelings towards, and you can fill in the blank. And that's fair and true. Working on a spiritual discipline of love doesn't mean that I have those ishy squishy feelings of love for everyone. That's unreasonable to expect. We're human, after all. No, what it means is that I check myself and I make sure that what I'm doing is operating out of a place of love. It means not getting down in the mud with others and slinging hate and fear. It means making sure that the decisions I make attempt to bring more love into my immediate circle and not fear or hate. And that sounds easy, but it isn't. It's a regular gut check. Are the words that are about to come out of my mouth ones that uplift and allow space for the other person to grow? Or are they ones that will tear down, instill fear, or ignite hate? Kathleen McTeague says, fear's pronoun is singular. I've got to watch out for me and mine. Love's pronoun is plural. We're in this together, and together we can grow things that will blossom even in a time of drought. Fear's pronoun is singular, and love's pronoun is plural. So if the decisions and disciplines I make and do come through a lens of love, how does that manifest in my daily life? Well, as I mentioned, it means I check my words before they come out of my mouth or my fingers. It means I make sure that I am grounded and connected to that best self of mine before I speak, act, or express myself in other ways. And it's not easy. Please know that. This is something I've been working on for years now. And I'm nowhere near perfect on this. And that's okay too, because that's what spiritual disciplines are all about. They're not done once, they're done daily, over and over again. There's no, well, I did it, I'm there now. It's about practicing them over and over again until they hopefully become easier. It also looks like struggling and wondering what the best decision is. It looks like trying not to kick myself when I get it wrong. And it looks like restoring and repairing when I get it wrong. But let's get down to brass tacks about this. Having a spiritual discipline of love means that I look through that lens of love when I vote. And that looks like voting for people and causes that don't cause more harm. Because there is a lot of harm out there. Harm that comes out of hate and fear. We've seen it a lot here in Florida over the last few years. And every year it seems like it can't get worse, and yet it tries. Using love as a lens for my actions when it comes to voting means that I am aware of what's going on rather than burying my head in the sand. Now, I'm not going to go deep into it today, but I encourage everyone here to read up on Project 2025. It's terrifying. And I need you to hear me when I say that this is nothing new. The things in there, the plans that are being written down to be operated on, are not some new idea. And I've said this to many people for many years. This plan has been talked about in certain circles at least since the mid to late 90s. How do I know? Because I heard it preached from the pulpit when I was in an evangelical church. Using love as my lens means I have to read the hard things, because otherwise I cannot be prepared to operate out of love and protect those who need to be protected. In her book, Emergent Strategy, Adrienne Marie Brown says, perhaps humans' core function is love. Love leads us to observe in a much deeper way than any other emotion. I think of how delightful it is to see something new in my lovers' faces, something they may only know from inside as a feeling. If love were the central practice of a new generation of organizers and spiritual leaders, it would have a massive impact on what was considered organizing. If the goal was to increase the love rather than winning or dominating a constant opponent, I think we could actually imagine liberation from constant oppression. We would suddenly be seeing everything we do, everyone we meet, not through the tactical eyes of war, but through the eyes of love. We would see there's no such thing as a blank canvas, an empty land, or a new idea, but everywhere there is complex, ancient, fertile ground full of potential. She continues, we would organize with the perspective that there is wisdom and experience and amazing story in the communities we love. And instead of starting up new ideas or organizations all the time, we would want to listen, support, collaborate, merge, and grow through fusion, not competition. We would understand that the strength of our movement is in the strength of our relationships, which could only be measured by their depth. Scaling up would mean going deeper and being more vulnerable and more empathetic. For me, love is the ideal that I hold myself up to. Am I doing what I'm doing out of a space of loving or not? Again, it's not easy. Fear lurks in the corners all the time. Sarah Sutherland Dean sums up love as a spiritual discipline when she says, someone called me a bleeding heart liberal. It was not intended as a compliment. However, I will always consider it one of the biggest compliments of my life. My heart bleeds for the underdog. My heart fights for those who can't fight. My heart rejoices in seeing others overcome adversity. My heart desires love and peace for everyone. My heart is compassionate and empathetic. My heart sees pain in others and wants to help. My heart believes in equality. My heart sees the good in people. My heart chooses action over fear. Love over fear. Love over hate. I truly believe that a radical love can change our world. How do I know? Because it changed me. As I mentioned, I grew up in traditions where spiritual disciplines were rooted in hate and fear, which led to a lot of hate and fear coming out of my own mouth. And again, I look back on that time in my life and shudder because it wasn't who I am at my core. I don't just say that to make myself feel better. I know because even during that time, what came out of my mouth caused me harm too. It felt gross. It felt icky. And it felt like I couldn't challenge it because of that fear that I was entrenched in. I tell you all of this to tell you that we as humans are capable of so many things: deep pain and hurt, and deep love and healing and change. I truly believe that everyone is capable of changing. Capable is not the same as willing. I'm aware there are some who are so entrenched in their fear that they aren't willing to step outside of what has become comfortable in order to change. Love as a spiritual discipline, as a lens, gives that opportunity and space. And it also creates brave spaces where people can be vulnerable. In that space of being vulnerable, true growth and love and change is possible. Love as a spiritual discipline doesn't mean that I have to be able to love everything about everyone, because that's unrealistic. What it does mean is that I have a choice in every encounter I have. Am I able to see them as human? Am I able to see that hate is often rooted in fear? Am I able to see that fear allows people to lash out? Am I able to see that each of us carry stories and experiences in our hearts that cause reactions instead of responses? I have great hope that if we put love at the center of what we do as individuals and as congregations, we really can change the world. I have that hope because I've seen it happen. It's happened to me. It's happened to those I know. It's happened in denominations across the US. Change is possible. But when we cease to see that, we are no longer using the spiritual discipline of love to guide our actions. Let's show the world our love. Let's show ourselves and those around us our love. And let's get out there and change the world. Amen. May it be so, and blessed be.